Welcome to the Choose Hard podcast. Today's guest is the one and only Andrew Coates. Andrew Coates is the perfect example of a role model coach that any upcoming coach, and really any seasoned coach who is trying to navigate the coaching industry, social media, marketing, building relationships, and networking in 2025 needs to pay attention to. He is somebody who has been in the industry we started at the same time about 15 years ago, and we came up in a very similar way. So it was really fun to talk with him and really reminisce on our upbringing, but mainly focus on what pillars he had in place and what big rocks he focused on most that allowed him to be successful today. And it allowed him to ride the wave of social media, but not build his business and his backbone on social media. He built his backbone on great coaching and developing amazing relationships over the years. He is evidence-based, he's extremely knowledgeable, and he has so many great friends in the industry who he pulls wisdom from and can use as examples of success in podcasts like this. So I think you're going to hear a lot of great information on how he's become successful, but also what he's learned from so many people he knows and has built relationships with in the industry over the years. You can check him out at Andrew Coates Fitness on Instagram, andrewcoatesfitness.com for his website and blog. And his podcast is the Lift Free Diet Hard podcast, which I have been on years and years and years ago. But since then, he has grown it tremendously and had so many amazing guests on. So I highly recommend you go check that as well. So without any further ado, let's talk to the one and only Andrew Coates.
The greatest things in life all start with a challenge.
You must accept that everything is hard before it gets easy.
Everything you want in life begins with a hard path.
Dude, I think this has been long overdue. And it's funny because as I was getting kind of prepared for this a week or so ago, I just Googled both of our names together because I was like, man, I swear we did something. And I think I was on your podcast years and years and years ago. And I don't even, I barely even remember. That's how long it's been. But I think it's a good thing to say because that's how long we've both been doing long form content, which we're going to touch on.
Well, we met at the 2017 Vigor Ground Fitness and Business Summit. And obviously our friend Luca Hosfars been a big part of both of our careers. So big shout out to Luca, obviously. And and then you were on and it's been years. I mean, I've been doing mine for 8 years and it's like over 215 episodes, which kind of surreal.
It is. Yeah, dude. It's really cool to see. I love being able to reconnect with people, sporadically over the years that are in the industry and watching them continue to do the right things in the right way and continue to grow, because I think today more than ever, we need good coaches. And that's really what I want to dive into today, because you're such a good example of this, man. So first and foremost, tell the listeners, if they don't know, who is Andrew Coates and really like how you got started, because we're going to kind of go back and kind of go through that journey.
I like to joke that I wasn't the teenage passionate coach who started out, first there. I took a lot of detours along the way. A Bachelor of Commerce degree from Memorial University of Newfoundland, where I grew up, where I'm originally from in Eastern Canada. I now live in Edmonton, Alberta. I played sports growing up. I was very lucky. Big shout out to my parents. They were way ahead of the curve. A lot of home cooked meals, a lot of nutritious food, a lot of modeling a very good nutritional food environment. They encouraged us to. I didn't take to swimming. My parents were elite swimmers. They were cross-country skiers, so I actually competed as a cross-country skier, provincial medals when I was in my earliest of my teens. Played a lot of basketball, every sport we get our hands on. But this is small town, rural Newfoundland. So as I joked on, I know you listened to my appearance on the Coach 'Em Up podcast with Tim Riley. It's like being a 6'2" white power forward in rural Newfoundland does not lend itself to going to play basketball beyond high school, right? Very well, dreams crushed, right? And I thought I was going to go to medical school. I pivoted to business school. And along the way, life took sideways turns. Me and friends and my brother, got pretty heavily involved in the bar scene. I eventually owned my own nightclub when I was in my mid to late 20s. That was a fun fiasco with a lot of headaches and not a sustainable way to live life. So I actually moved across the country at 28. But I also been pretty enthusiastic about the gym. My dad bought me a weight bench set when I was in my mid-teens, lifted intermittently, intermittently through university, and then finally really got super consistent at about 24 years of age, put on a whole bunch of muscle in a very short amount of time. And, so obviously that changed life. You're walking around more muscular and people are treating you differently. I'm like, okay, cool. I like this. I like how this feels, confidence and whatnot. And I found a job in a casino of all places when I moved to Edmonton. So I've worked for banks, I've worked in bars, I've owned nightclubs, all this stuff. Life experience is actually one of the most valuable things as a coach, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you gain it whatever you do, but different experiences is fun. And I started a job at a casino, and I was playing like a lot of World of Warcraft and hiding from the world. I'm like, I don't want to be out in the bar scene or whatever. And I still have clients this day who are big into World of Warcraft, so we could actually bridge that gap, talk about it. It's nostalgic. I can't go back there because like it's just too much of a time sink, but it's fun to remember. So that's a little key for coaches, right? You got to take like serious interest. There's only so much like technical cueing and nutrition you can talk with them if they continue to see you week after week, month after month. And along the way, this gym that I was working out at kept bugging me to come work as a trainer. I kept saying no until I finally said yes. I'm sick of this casino bullshit. And I was overwhelmed at first. I was like, I can't do this. But pretty quickly I realized, okay, I see potential here. I'm excited about this. I got busy very quickly. I mean, 15 years ago, starting this, very different industry. There were a lot less gyms at the time. There's a lot more foot traffic at this one gym. They sold a lot of clients, filled me up pretty quickly. And then I was pretty good at renewing my clients, generating referral business. Other trainers would leave and their clients would see me with my clients, and my clients I was really engaged with my clients. Like, you can't understate the importance of actually how you show up and interact with your clients. Because everybody's, as much as we say, like, no one's watching you with the lifter in the gym, the trainers, everybody's aware of you. Even the people who like are super jacked, super experienced, the power lifters, physique competitors, they see who the trainers are.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, but they also, for lack of a better way to say it, they kind of judge, right? They have their own standard, what they think is appropriate. And unfortunately, in this particular case, this demographic, they do judge you based on how you appear. And I know a lot of trainers really get into some ideological arguments over, do you have to look the part? Should your body be your business card? I think a lot of those social media posts that go into that stuff on either side, the people who are like, no, it absolutely is your business card, or no, it's not your business card. All it matters is what you know. They miss a lot of the important nuance. Here's I'll come at it from two sides. The clients that I've had over the years, now there's self-selection bias here, have overwhelmingly said that one of the things that appealed to them was the fact that I was, muscular, lean, in shape. That's what they're telling me, okay? Again, self-selection bias. I know trainers who are not classically in, the shape that, a lot of you, me, and our friends are, who do extremely well. And the knowledge absolutely is king. You have to know what you're doing. Because then, of course, people use the argument that, well, you get all these, jack ripped, juiced up people who shouldn't be coaching people. It's actually true. Most of them shouldn't. Like, the fact that you have a certain physique doesn't guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
But people, absolutely, general population will take this into account. The people who are, I was alluding to the powerlifters, the physique athletes, the experienced lifters, they may themselves think, I would never hire a trainer. But they do pick out the people that they think are the best in a facility that they would trust with their referrals, their family, their kids. Mm-hmm. And I've actually gotten a lot of referral business over the years from these type of people who sent me the people in their world. This is another thing that coaches miss. And I've worked with a few coaches and trainers who, if they didn't think that the person in front of them that they're interacting with would potentially lead to business for them, they ignore them. They're cold, they're unpleasant, they were aloof. This is a career killer. Warmth, eye contact, smile. Again, like, we can unintentionally seem a little bit intimidating, but at every turn, I try to invite eye contact, smile at people, acknowledge, a kind word in these sort of gym spaces. Because, I'm in a lot of my coaching now is in my home basement gym. I still contract at a bigger facility, a medium-sized facility. It's going to get bigger soon when it moves. But I worked in a commercial gym for 6 years. Great experience. And I got a ton of floor walk-up business. Why? Because I would interact with people. And a lot of the people who never would have possibly become clients of mine became some of my closest friends. So there's also the potential isolation that if we work long hours and what have you, well, you actually find a lot of kindred spirits on a gym floor. And a lot of those friends of mine to this day, in fact, the majority of my friends here in Edmonton are people I met in the gym. And funny enough, some of those people who I never would have thought for a second, physique athletes, etc., actually have trained with me in pockets or become longtime clients over time. So never make assumptions about who may or may not train with you. Now, back to the point about the shape you're in. And this is the way I like to look at it. If you are a trainer who is struggling to be busy, okay, if you're struggling with your business, and if you are, again, people will argue to the death about, can you judge whether someone's fit based upon how they appear? I'm not interested in that argument. This is about what the average person thinks. You could be ideological and purist all you want. Let's deal in reality here and how people think. If you are not, let's say it, visibly in shape, and people may fight, I don't care that this offends you. Your attitude is actually part of the problem if you're offended by this sentiment. You're not realistic about this. If you're not visibly in shape and you're struggling in your business, one of the best things you can pour your time and effort and attention into is working on your own fitness journey. And so the people who, I know lots of coaches who are not the jack shredded coach, but they have a very cool transformation. I mean, sometimes they've lost over 100 pounds. And if you put that journey, that evidence, you are extraordinarily relatable. You are extraordinarily accessible, unthreatening to the person who sees where they currently are in where you had been before or somewhere on your journey. So I think that's a really good thing to lean on in your, quote, content in your media, right?
One of the things that makes me think about too is, and I've talked about this quite a bit, this entire topic. We've had a lot of coaches hire us just for normal online fitness and nutrition coaching. And I've heard so many times that they end up being more successful in their business, whether they're in person or online. And it's not because we did business coaching with them, because we didn't. They worked with somebody on my team and they got in really good shape. And I think one of the problems that you kind of danced around it, and I would love to hear you kind of riff on this, but it's facts versus feelings. If somebody's like, well, you don't have to be in great shape. That's how you feel. But the reality is that perception is reality, and people will judge a book by its cover until they meet you. So if you want the opportunity to show your knowledge, you have to look healthy. You don't have to be shredded, but you got to look healthy. You can't look like you don't work out and expect people to trust you to help them work out. You know what I mean?
There's something deeper here, and I'll try to explain it carefully, but it's important. In the fitness industry, we know that there's a lower barrier to entry, and I don't bemoan that fact. There's a lot of people who scream, oh, we need more regulation. Well, that doesn't work because who's going to regulate it? What geographical jurisdiction, what country, the internet as a whole? You may be in, let's say, Missouri. Let's say if the state of Missouri decides it's going to regulate heavily, who's allowed to say what on the internet, right? There's this thing now where China is mandating that you can't talk about, I don't know if it's, certainly it's medicine, there's some other things, some specialties, I don't know if it's engineering, whatever, unless you have the degrees or designations in those things. I mean, so, and then there's all these people cheering this stuff. Sounds great. Oh boy, there's a lot of problems. First of all, this is fucking China here, okay? Like an authoritarian regime. The only way this is possible is if you are living in an authoritarian regime that has complete control over media, social media. I'm sorry, I do not want to live in that world, right? Yeah. So that's your first problem right there. Two, and China is able to actually stop outside media from coming into the country. Okay, so it actually can do that. The United States, Canada, Western Europe, et cetera, none of those countries could theoretically do this. But if they tried, well, where are the shitbags going to go? Let's say the shitbag influencer, grifter is an online entity. Well, they're mobile. Let's say they decide, well, England is now doing this. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to move to Dubai or Thailand or somewhere else or somewhere in the U.S. that it doesn't have these regulations. While you, the local coach who's now bounded by this, cheering for this stuff, is hamstring on, being able to have a social media presence, build brand, et cetera. Now, here's a second problem with all this stuff. Let's say if we could regulate and legislate all of the bad faith actors, and we could agree, like as if the industry would somehow finally agree upon all of the principles of evidence-based nutrition, all the principles of evidence-based, training. My God, those are war zones, and agree upon this stuff. And you get those people all off the internet, all the bad guys across the world. That doesn't mean that you, the great coach who has not embraced developing a brand space, whether it's social media, whether it's long form media, even just like well-known in your local sphere, it doesn't mean that the people who were following the grifters and the people with large followings, the influencers you don't like, this nebulous bad word influencer, that they would somehow know who you are or hire you. It's still incumbent upon you to create great information media, share it, learn how to use social media, learn how to use long form media. A podcast like this is a great example. And you end up getting those people's attention, share better info. Yeah, it's challenging. We can get into that, but the right people will self-select. And what I've noticed is the people who are actually successful, the people who have larger brands, who have successful businesses, are never complaining about what, screaming for regulation, right? Now, they'll definitely call out the bad faith actors, the grifters, and what have you. And sure, okay, I think it's really important to actually battle the bad stuff. But the second part of this is, if you want to understand, because there's a lower barrier to entry, and because there's an embedded status game within the fitness industry, it attracts a lot of useless and unqualified people into our space. Okay, that's true, right? I think our industry is full of wonderful people. There's a lot of incredible people. The low barrier entry allowed me to get a certification, start training, gain experience. I poured into evidence-based resources, built, and here we are, right? But what unfortunately and often happens is you get people who are rooted in socio-ideological things, and they become status-seeking talking heads within the fitness industry, and they exist on all sides of that spectrum, whether it's, carnivore bro, anti-seed oil type stuff. It's an example of it, right? It tends to have a very strong ideological position. Or if it's the most extreme of the health at any size crowd, who are, peddling this, complete ideological lie that there's no relationship between your degree of adiposity and your long-term metabolic health outcomes. I mean, there was a period like a few years ago where, all the evidence-based crowd who knew this was complete rubbish would kind of be quiet because someone would scream at you that you're fat phobic. If we are no longer tolerating this nonsense. Yeah. These people they're not credible evidence-based people. They are charlatans who wrap themselves in a cloak of progressive ideology. And they preach these things that the industry is inherently and universally bad, but they somehow are, uniquely virtuous, and they can help people. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people who would rather be told the comforting lie than the uncomfortable truth that, this stuff, it is challenging to change. There are definitive societal advantages and disadvantages of different, groups and demographics and where you are geographically, et cetera. These things are all relevant. That's true. But these bad faith actors on one side of the spectrum tend to be incredibly disempowering. And once you start to look for this language and the way that they talk, you can tell, wait a second, these are narcissistic, status-seeking grifters who've just found a way to enter our space to gain status and worship. They want reverence. And they are fucking horrible people when you actually clash with them. They're bullies and they're fight pickers. And if you notice this sort of stuff, you go, wait a second, this isn't helping anybody, right? And then the other side of the spectrum is, again, it's this, and someone listening might be like, no, seed oils are bad. You know what? I just had an episode with Danny Lennon, one of the smartest people in nutrition space, Sigma Nutrition Radio. It's an OG podcast. And, depending on the time of all this release, it'll be out and it actually goes into the evidence, right? Now, I'm not interested in this ideological war zone, even over seed oils, right? Sometimes that just becomes a terrible place and people are insane. And I protect the sanctity of my emotional well-being by not posting up on social media saying how wonderful seed oils are. I'm not interested in picking those fights on either side. You have to have some thick skin if you want to do that stuff. But when you start looking at a lot of the loudest, most performative figures in our industry, you start to see, wait a second here, there's a status game. I'm sorry, we whip around the word narcissism, but there's a lot of that here. And it can be very discouraging for the coach who just wants to share really great information, just wants to help people. You don't have to play the game with bombast and loudness. You and I and our friend Luca and so many other, ethical, evidence-based professionals are examples of that. But I understand why it feels challenging.
I think this is a perfect segue into one of the things I really wanted to pull out of you, because there's been times where I've even been like, oh, I'm afraid to say this or post this because you're afraid of getting attacked online. I'm far from that now because I just don't care anymore. But at one point, it's like somebody saying you're fat phobic for just calling out what is the truth about having an absurd amount of body fat. When you are obese, you are literally, all-cause mortality goes up across the board. We don't have to even argue this. But when somebody screams you're fat phobic, it's comical because I have built my life around helping people lose fat. I can't be fat phobic. This is what I'm passionate about, is helping people. I grew up the chubby kid. Like,
But
this
there
is
are
what,
people, and this is a good example of the worst
Yeah.
case. There are people that say that wanting to lose fat, that you, the person who is struggling with your
Yeah.
body image and worried about your metabolic health, and you have blood work, your doctor's telling you, but there are people, and these are the craziest of the worst, but they will say to you, wanting to lose weight is fat phobic, right? I think we're at this point now where we kind of know that is a dangerous nutcase. That is
Yeah.
not a good faith actor. That is not an honest person. We can discard these people. We can tune them out. And I think they were a bit of a problem for the average person who was struggling. This is a little bit of a side tangent, but like, we can get into nuance here. We can get into the fact that, I mean, they'll make claims about, again, your level of adiposity. Well, we actually now understand that your visceral, your intra-abdominal, your fat around your organs is actually much, much worse for us than, body fat that accumulates kind of arms, thighs, legs, butt, et cetera, right? There's a big difference there, right? We know that, LDL cholesterol, high LDL cholesterol is one of the worst things, one of the biggest issues for, long-term atherosclerosis, right? Cardiovascular disease. And if you focus on these, you can also have people who are normal BMI, normal body weight, like people lose their minds over BMI. It's not great for individuals. It's extraordinarily useful across populations. Sorry, It just is, right? Yes, you have to account a little bit for ethnicity in these, okay, but I wonder how many people I've already offended. I think your audience is probably like understands all this stuff, right? The nuance.
they do. Yeah.
We're good. I'm sorry that, like, again, facts are hurting your feelings, right? But then again, when you're communicating with people, you can present them with facts, and oftentimes what you actually need to do is to go into the emotional side. You can't just beat them over the head with like, oh, no, sorry, what your belief system is completely wrong, right? Where are they going to go? They're going to go to the ideological grifter who's telling them, hey, it's healthy and safe and wonderful to be morbidly obese, right? Because that's actually going to be more comforting. It's less conflicting with their belief system at that moment. I'll try to bring this back here. I'm going to get you to cue me back up again, because I think I've kind of exhausted that line of thought.
Well, and one of the things I was kind of getting into and wanted to ask you about is these pillars that have helped you be successful. And I think it ties into this because when I look at, I mean, you said Danny Lennon, and I got excited because I was like, man, I had Danny Lennon on my podcast like 5 or 6 years ago, and he's an OG. I really should. I remember interviewing him about chrononutrition when he was talking about a lot of that research, because it's really fun. But the reason I say that is because when you look at, even tying it back to looking the part, okay, well, yeah, you can't trust anybody who's just roided out and is jacked. But also, that person's not running a long form podcast because they can't speak on a topic in depth for an hour. They don't have raving fans giving them reviews and referrals. They don't have a network full of people inside the industry who are willing to open doors for them. They don't speak on stages. Like, they don't have people working for them. Like, I can go on, but we can get upset that, it sucks. You got to do the work. You got to be in great shape, and you also have to know your shit. But like, that's just how it is. And when you want to be a trusted figure in the industry, that's part of it. Like, that's a great responsibility. So you have to have both sides of it. And I think that's where people go wrong. But you've done this really well, because you have done well on social media and you do really well with your podcast. But you've also been a writer for many years, like myself, getting published on places way back in the day to start your career. Like, we were both bloggers before. And then funny enough, we actually started, my career started 15 years ago as well. Side note too, my whole family on my mom's side, they're all from Toronto. So I got a bunch of Canadians in my family as well. But point is that we started very similarly, and we never lost sight of those things, building a network and writing, all these things. So I would love to kind of get into what you feel are maybe the pillars or the big key, like the big rocks that you've seen really help you be successful that you never let go of.
Well, I guess I didn't fully answer your original question about like the career, because so this will actually go well into it. I put my head down for what turned out to be 6 years in a commercial gym. Early in that time, I found T-Nation, started reading those articles every morning back on my laptop before everything was mobile. Learned a ton, and whether it's, your Martin Rooney's or Eric Cressy's or however many other iconic figures, Ben Bruno, etc.
I used to print those articles, dude, and bring them to
There we
work.
go. I'd get some stuff off of bodybuilding.com and the other evidence-based authorities out there. Somewhere along the way, I found Lane Norton and started watching his old video logs about nutrition. That was one of the best early evidence-based resources. John Berardi, again, off of T-Nation, then got into early precision nutrition. I got precision nutrition certified. And I started listening to some of the fitness podcasts that were very early, the Fitcast, Kevin Larrabee, obviously Danny Lennon, Sigma Nutrition. Lane had an old podcast where it was Physique Science Radio. It was actually one of the first podcasts I ever listened to. Yeah, and I remember Lane's then assistant, Sohee Lee, now Sohee Carpenter, and that's how I got onto Sohee, and so on and so forth. And then that's how I found more and more figures in the industry. And then I left the commercial gym after 6 years, went over to a friend of mine's gym as a contractor. That was a brilliant move. I met a friend of mine who just happened to be doing a little coaching there, my friend Dean Guido, and months later he wanted to start a podcast. That was the origins, and he left after 150 episodes because he's starting a family, but ensured that I kept it going. And then around that same time, I both started to travel to fitness conferences. And Lucas, where I met you, was the second one I traveled to. And I met a lot of the industry there. And again, just humble, hat in hand, coach in the audience, happy to learn. And I did these for a few years. And along the way, as I met people, I would have them on my podcast. I am still learning who more and more evidence-based practitioners are in the industry. And that both rooted me in a foundation of trying to find the best information, the best credible people. And I never said about building relationships, and people use the word networking, it seems sort of almost transactional. No, I just enjoyed being out in these spaces and meeting people and learning. And as time grew, my writing stuff turned into an invitation to write for T-Nation. And then that turned into Generation Iron and several other publications, Muscle Fitness Magazine, Men's Health, On It, what else? Bodybuilding.com, Lead FTS, right? Pretty much all the big stuff of the era. And doing a little bit of writing for myself, continuing with the podcast. So now all of a sudden there's this investment in long form media platforms. And then in late 2019, I said, well, shit, if I'm doing all this long form stuff, I also need to be consistent with social media as a complement to it. And so I just committed to posting every day. And pretty quickly, it started gaining a little bit of traction. Some really big figures in the industry who are friends of mine from my travel, they started sharing my stuff, and that drove more following my way. But it was a very consistent build and climb over time, over several years. I've changed the way I approach social media now. I find that the industry, the algorithms have changed. Definitely more sensational stuff rules. It always did, but even more so now because you have more mature platforms. There is more competition for that one square as you scroll. The user base is not growing nearly as fast. There's way more people in there. There's more AI generated content. There's more volume of content. There's competition between different platforms. When I first started getting really serious about Instagram, TikTok wasn't a thing. Now TikTok's huge, and then Instagram has pivoted to be more like TikTok, the interest-based algorithm. And so more viral-based video stuff is being pushed out. And in our world, what's happening is I think a lot of coaches, because a lot of the publications I reference, they're no longer operating the same way, or they're no longer even a thing anymore. There's very limited organic discoverability via podcasts. We know that. We're serving our warm core audience, okay? By the way, side note, everybody listening, like if you're a regular listener for Cody, here's how you help, because this doesn't get shown on an algorithmic social media platform.
Yeah.
If you like this, you got some coach who's hearing this episode, send it to that person. You're like, hey, I think you will actually learn a lot about career development from this episode and other stuff. And that is how you help reward Cody for platforming me and the other guests, right? I want you to follow me, right? Come follow me. I'll respond to any of your questions and messages. Okay, back on track. But if anybody's noticed, yes, social media feels more frustrating. Now you can get into a narrative that what's the point? I'm not going to bother. I quit, etc. Resentful of the way it works. That doesn't get you anywhere. There's no value in that. But I also deliberately decided that I did not want. I look at there are a lot. Layne Norton is a great example. There are others in that, like Jordan Syatt, Dr. Mike Isertel, and you know what? I love Mike. RP Strength is a sponsor of mine. I've seen Mike a couple times this year at different things I've traveled to. But again, these are figures that are being relentlessly attacked and deal with borderline obsession, malevolence. Now, part of that too is, Jordan Syatt's a bit of a quieter. He's not a contentious figure, but Mike and Layne ultimately they will get on video and they will say less bombastic type shit. Lane in particular will call out the grifters and the charlatans of the industry. People fight back, or people recognize that they can build status by attacking the biggest figures in the industry.
Yeah.
And I am none of these people. But at the same time, if I had decided to pour all of my time and effort into content creation, brand development, et cetera, and scale it, I could approach some of that. And yes, it's easy to say, oh, I could have done that if I tried. It's not that simple. But remember, I'm a full-time in-person personal trainer. I have online stuff, do the podcast, et cetera. There are a lot of people we know who their full-time job is to create video-based media for social media, and they don't do a lot of coaching. Okay, they may have a team under them. There, some of them are, evidence-based or not evidence-based talking heads that are the face, the head of the hydra of a brand, and their whole thing is to generate content to drive leads and business into this business-based entity. And there are good guys who do that, and there are bad guys who do that. But I don't love the current ecosystem. I know there are other ways. I'm more patient with it, but I've deliberately chosen not to do stitch-based video that attacks, either punches up on whatever big figure says some sort of ridiculous thing that may be taken semi out of context on a podcast, or some smaller creator who's just saying something either outrageous or uninformed, whatever. I'm not interested in the blowback, the mental health consequences of being attacked. I've seen some of the blowback when people I know have called someone out for saying or doing something awful. And sometimes those people are nasty. They're horrifying. I mean, I've seen people whose children and families have been threatened. People, family members figured out who their social media is, and they're getting nasty messages. I've seen some really horrible, ugly stuff. Lawsuits. And guess what? That stuff will all overwhelmingly distract me from my mission, which is to serve the client in front of me.
Yeah.
And I would rather at this stage focus on the long form media. The podcast has been doing great. Travel, immerse myself in events and connect with the right people and have the right people self-select versus try to be the fitness industry's biggest talking head. Because guess what? The bigger you go up that ladder, the more people shooting arrows at you from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And but here's the thing. That's also a narrative. It is a story that reinforces choices that keeps me from doing some of these things. But I think it's grounded in the wisdom to know I can't do it all, that I don't have time for it all. And if I'm already, sustainably at capacity for my in-person coaching, and any time that someone drops out, I've got referrals and whatever that tends to ebb and flow. My online one-on-one business is exactly as much as I can handle. I'll take a very serious inquiry if someone's really, really interested. My quarterly women's program, that one consistently does great. The volume of recording for podcasting and preparing for it is time consuming. I don't write as much as I should, and I want to get back to more of that. I'm actually working on a course right now. Yeah, I know, fun. But I'm actually very careful what I say yes and no to, right, at this stage of my career. Earlier on, I said yes to everything. So let's go back a little bit because I know I'm wandering. When I was invited to write for T Nation, I'd already been writing and studied books. I mean, over my shoulder, if anybody's watching video, there's a big pile of books on writing here, right? Okay, take a screenshot, zoom in, you'll see a whole bunch. Message me, I'll give you specifics. I studied the hell out of that. When I was invited to speak at my friend's conference. The first speaking thing was actually 2021. I tried to turn my friend down, but he said, no, I want you. I said, okay. So my first thing was I texted Luca. I'm like, hey, Luca, what books you got on public speaking? Gave me a couple. Dove into that. An old girlfriend at the time helped me learn to build presentations on PowerPoint, and that was great. And that went really well. That turned into more invitations, and then that exploded for a few years. I didn't seek that out. And I think here's another thing that coaches kind of get themselves in trouble with, misguided. They think that, and I've said this in other platforms, so forgive me if someone's hearing this before. There are coaches that think the shortcut is, and they're thinking status, right? And some of it may be well-intentioned. Some of them just want the status. They want it. They look at the figures who are on the podcast, on the stage, like, I want that. You have no idea that doesn't put business into people into your business. But they think, well, if I just get on the stages and if I just get on the podcast, it's going to make me, and it's going to get me the followers, and it's going to get me the clients. All of the people that are on those stages and end up on a lot of these podcasts are there because they got invitations based on depth of relationship and the tenure of their time in the industry, their credibility as evidence-based authorities, industry leaders, success in business. And I think the people who are seeking the shortcut have it backwards. So you're far better off, put your head down, serve the client in front of you, get the referral business. And this stuff takes time. You can't rush this stuff. And while you're doing it, with the extra time, and this is something that Jonathan Goodman puts it really well, but it's like you make deposits in, with the extra time you have, you make deposits in building, let's call it content. I almost hate the word. And that could be, certainly social media I think is great. A lot of people now are almost overwhelmingly only doing social media. But if you like writing, if you do like video, if you do like podcast-based stuff, you can do all those things. You can actually learn the skill of public speaking by looking locally and exploring and volunteer for corporate wellness talks. Luca, again, talks about this a lot. He has done a ton of this stuff. He's a legend in the local space, and his gym dominates. That's a foundation. You see Luca on stages, and I use him because we both know him. Some of our listeners certainly will. He's a good example of doing things the way that I've described it. Head down, develop the relationships, create valuable media and stuff with the extra time that you have. He's still coaching on the floor. Just had his first kid. He's still doing some coaching. He never lost sight of it. He's not a social media talking head figure. And he's still there shaking hands within the local community, serving that local community. And what ends up happening? Everybody wants him on their stage. Everybody wants him on their podcast. And he's at the point where now he's really got to be careful about what he says yes to.
You just hit on a few different topics that I constantly tell people. It's actually funny too, because even like the people you pointed out and what you did in the early point, there's so many commonalities with what I did, and the things I found, and like Lane Norton in his lawn chair by his pool in his backyard and watching these videos. But the in-person stuff, I think, is a huge underrated aspect of even online coaches. They don't try to find their local community and do things. Focusing on the long-form content is so huge because it really does help you develop the knowledge and get better at speaking, and get better at coaching and content. But I want to ask you, because I think you're a perfect person to answer this question. There's a lot of coaches who probably hear this, agree with it. They trust both of us in what we say, but it's hard to navigate because now, to your point, social media, the algorithm, everything's different. When and what I try to do is look at it very logically, because I did the same thing. I even tested out some of these. Let me critique, this, and it did really well, but I didn't love it. And I was trying to find videos that I wasn't really offending anybody. And it was like, hey, I like this person, but I disagree. This is why. And it was like working, but I'm like, I just don't feel, it's not my thing. And so I consistently try to avoid the search for dopamine, I would say, with likes and stuff. But if you look at now, you can see how many people view a carousel post, and I will get 10,000 people swiping through and looking at it, and 100 people liking it. I will get way more people commenting and saving and even sharing than I do liking it. It's like, look at your own behaviors. When I go in bed and I'm looking at social media with my wife, I only like stuff that it's like, I have to admit it, it's my friend. It's somebody I want to support. And I like the ones I want to support. Me and my wife watch funny videos of comedians. Me and my daughter, I'll show her bulldog videos. We have a little English bulldog, and she loves watching funny videos of bulldogs, but it's entertainment. And so if I take that away, I don't have to I have to start being that person. And if I don't want to, I have to accept that maybe social media isn't what it was. And that's okay, because you can build a business with other forms of content and referrals and networking, being a great coach and word of mouth. You know what I mean?
I got a few thoughts here. So if everybody listening thinks about this, in those moments when you are swiping through, whether they're TikToks or Reels, and you're watching the video-based, more entertainment-based stuff. I mean, I get a lot of cat videos. Your algorithm is going to show you what it shows you.
Yeah.
And an example. So my best friend, she sends me a lot of cat memes, and she sends me a lot of Lord of the Rings memes. She loves Lord of the Rings. And so the stuff in between the people I follow on Instagram is mostly those two things. And so I see something, I look at it, and half the time I don't even watch the entire thing. I will send it to her. I sometimes like it, but I like it almost as a flag. Hey, I've seen this, so you now know I've seen this. It'll send this back to me in 6 months. I never follow those accounts. I have no relationship with those scouts. I'm in a mode, and a lot of people are in different modes when they are scrolling, especially later in the evening, where they're seeking dopamine and entertainment. Okay, that is not everybody all the time, but it is actually really important. And it's more prevalent on TikTok than it is on Instagram. So because of the interest-based algorithm, we get fed a lot of the things that we are interested in, but we don't necessarily have a relationship with the creator. So it doesn't generate as much follower growth. Okay, that's true. So if you think about that through your own consumption behavior, now flip it to you being the coach. Here's what I think people should do. You create without an expectation of a specific result based on how each individual post does. I think it's wise to learn from how they're doing, okay? If you are just nonstop sucking and struggling and getting nowhere, okay, it might be wise to work on the quality of having a good hook to draw people in, because if you're trying to share great information, you still want people to pay attention to it. You want them to share it. You want them to save it, right? Work on the practice of writing or your video editing skills. Those are skills you can develop. They will be valuable. Writing and video editing skills are some of the most valuable things you as a coach can develop. But keep in mind that you are not trying to win the internet. You are trying to find the person that you can help who will self-select your message. So therefore, is the metric, because social media trains you, the metric of likes and shares and saves and all this sort of stuff and do well in the algorithm. But that's misaligned from what is our goal. Help people. It's not to say that they're completely incongruent, but our goal is oftentimes to get more clients, get more business, and to earn a livelihood. Great. And if you're creating really good information that self-selects to a narrower audience, but that really likes what you're saying, those people will then dive deeper. So I try to treat social media. Listen, a lot of my social media posts are very surface level. You know, I get a lot of these comments. It's the best days. Like, I needed this today. If it's a little bit of a motivational boost, great, whatever. Yeah. I'm not going in and citing 5 studies on why, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, blah, 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 this versus the war zone that is the modern hypertrophy space right now. And guess what? There's a lot of status chasing, stitch-based, malice in that space. It's horrible. And it's really hard to tease out what's credible and what's not. So, and there's, we all dunking now and making fun of these science-based lifters. And I'm sorry, this is true. It goes back to what you look like. It's like these skinny teenagers who are, got themselves seatbelted into cable machines, and they're saying that all you need to do is 3 reps super heavy of this tricep press down. And meanwhile, they've got some sort of foam roller stuck across their arm to keep them locked stable. It's these are the extremes. And yes, it's sort of a straw man to represent the entirety of the science-based community, but this is just nonsense. I'm sorry. It is bullshit. But then the other side of the spectrum, which is the bro hard space, guess what? There's some wisdom in there. There's also a lot of bullshit there too. So it's tricky to kind of tease that out. But what I think is wise, what you and I have done, is to continue to create good, in-depth, long-form media that's evidence-based, through the lens of experience as well. Those two things. You can't have experience without evidence. You can't have evidence without experience unless you're a brilliant PhD. And even then, sometimes those types will say things they haven't coached people ever or in years. And it's that's not, you need to coach the people in the gym to actually understand how this stuff works. And let me regain my thoughts here. Create valuable media that's longer form. It's going to self-select to a narrower audience, but those are the people that choose to come to you. And if you do it really well and you gain these skills, well, it'll grow over time. And in both of our cases, that led to invitations and opportunities with larger platforms. Again, T-Nation being just one of them, right? Mm-hmm. And there's also an element of timing there. It's hard to recreate because now with the writing space, we're going to see a lot more AI-based stuff. We're going to see SEO, search-based stuff. A lot of these websites are not functioning the way they used to. So there's less opportunity to become an authority via the OG platforms. And a lot of these younger people, a lot of people in general, are consuming social media for their evidence-based training nutrition content. So what do? Well, maybe you take what you would have written in a article or a YouTube video, and you condense it down into a series of slides, and you condense it down into, a well put together video or a set of video carousels. And yes, that's a fair bit of potential time. You will get better at it, but it's also how you can merge that between helping a broader audience and sharing better quality info.
Yeah, I think that, it's unfortunate too, because I remember it just being a routine habit of me searching a random topic on a few different main websites that I know I could get a reliable article written by a coach who poured a lot of time and effort into it. And I was going to gather so much information and knowledge and be able to use that. And I could probably reach out. There was plenty of times where I'd email somebody who wrote an article and they would honestly answer questions for me. I remember numerous times people like Nate Green, like really giving me some really valuable wisdom to help me decide where I wanted to go in my career at the time. But with today's world, do you think that, granted, I understand that this is a task in itself. I mean, you and I both know to be a coach and do podcasting and video and stuff, and especially if you don't have help with it at first, most of us are editing our own stuff. Do you think it's kind of that is replacing articles? Because the reason I'm thinking this is that I know at a certain point in time, if you could write a really good article, especially if a good publication would put it out, it kind of was like a stamp of approval, like, okay, they know their shit, because you can't write a really in-depth article and this website's not going to put you on their website if they didn't trust this author. And it was a good way to tell. Podcasting, I see very similarly, maybe YouTube to an extent, depending on the kind of video, but it's when I listen to a podcast, you can instantly tell if somebody knows what they're doing, and you can go through their backlog of episodes and see. And in my opinion, I'd rather have 100 people listening to a podcast than 10,000 people seeing an Instagram post, because if they listen to that podcast, I am much more likely to be able to create a relationship and a coaching front with them and truly provide value because they trust me more.
There's several things here, so hopefully I'll remember them all. First point about your podcast. Have you ever heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about nutrition?
No.
Okay, it's not good. Okay, what do people think about when they hear Neil deGrasse Tyson? If you know who he is, he's a brilliant astrophysicist, incredibly credible there, PhD, right? Well-spoken. I'm always skeptical of science communicators because the moment that someone steps outside their area of educational expertise, you don't know what you're getting. So the reason why I bring up the nutrition, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but I heard him once say something that was so demonstrably false. It was something validating the carb insulin hypothesis as opposed to calories in, calories out. And there's oversimplifications, but whatever he said, for a person who I think is intelligent and able to measure information, was so factually incorrect, because I happen to know a lot about that, so I can detect it. But guess what? What do most people think when they hear Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about anything? Ooh, this is a brilliant, credible science communicator, PhD. Therefore, everything he says must be fact-based. Yep. You and I have the curse of knowledge to actually be able to filter things that we know. But the moment that we hear someone with big credentials wander outside their scope into something we actually have a lot of education, and yes, neither one of us have a PhD, but we are well educated in the basics of exercise science and nutritional science. And so I could pick up on that really quickly. But the average person can't. Right. And then we have people even in the evidence-based space who have PhDs on their name, who have big podcasts. There's a few doctors and PhDs in women's hormonal health that are, very popular on the big podcast circuit. They're under a lot of fire from people who actually know what they're talking about, debunking a lot of the bullshit that they're saying. But these are compelling, brilliant storytellers. Now, the lesson in this is just work on your storytelling. Work on that presence, but just do it with evidence. Another thing that was really relevant to all this, to your point about going to articles, when you and I were consuming T-Nation articles 11, 12, 13 years ago, 14 years ago, we didn't have social media the way it is. Okay. And T-Nation, bodybuilding.com, the other bodybuilding magazines, and the networks that had been the fitness industry gatekept who got to be an authority, right? The podcast, the early podcast, and who they had on, gatekept who demonstrated authority. And now people can bypass that because they can just go on social media, be good storytellers, say things that seem evidence-based. And there's lots of great people who have come up in this modern space who have, I'll give you a good example. So, Muscle Doc Jordan Shallow, he's been around for a while, right? But if I recall correctly, I don't think Jordan wrote for any of the publications I did. Smart guy, certainly developed relationships early on. I remember he worked at Dan Green's gym, the iconic powerlifter. Well-educated, but then started teaching, going around, and developed relationships early on with people like Don Saladino and some of the other people in space, Charlie Weingroff, I think. And sometimes that's it. Like you get platformed by the network of the people as you develop relationships with them. They recognize this guy's really smart. And so then he, along with Jordan Genta, developed Prescript, which is, I think, the best biomechanics and training anatomy educational thing ever. It's been traveling nonstop for years doing seminars. But again, boots on the ground, like tireless stuff, like the amount that guy travels. Like it's funny when you hear him tell stories about how like he would use like a hotel room iron to cook a chicken breast, right? So like when you get really deep into some of these stories, it's actually spectacular stuff, right? This is not, you're missing, it's not a highlight reel of social media. There's a grind there, right? There were some serious sacrifices, but this is a really smart human and he's where he is for a reason. But yes, now you can have really smart evidence-based people who can buy because they no longer have to go through the gatekeepers. But in those days, we had to get our information through the gatekeepers. Does that make sense? So the whole thing has changed. The analogy I always use is the music industry.
Yeah.
How did we consume music growing up? If you found out about a band,
MTV, record labels.
Okay. So you're there. So you said TV, we got radio, and we have like touring, like as a support act for a major whatever, right? And then they would record CDs, but they would tour in support of the CDs, right? And the record label chose, this is a key, they were the gatekeeper. They paid for the distribution of music on radio stations and on TV where you would discover artists. That's it. That's how the model worked. The record companies had a lot of control. Here's a fun little fact. And I said this on part of this on the Coach 'em Up podcast again. So if anybody's seen both, sorry. If you go back and you look at pictures of Pantera from the late 80s, they were a hair metal band. Okay. If you think about
you blew my mind when you said that on that other podcast.
Did you go look at Google a picture of Pantera from the 80s? You got Phil with long hair. They're wearing like the kind of the leopard skin type shit or whatever. They got the teased out 80s hair.
Wild.
Right? But it gets more interesting. Guess what other early 90s bands also had their roots in hair metal-ish type sound?
Oh, you said this on the podcast.
Three of the four cornerstone grunge bands from Seattle. Nirvana, no. But Pearl Jam, Andrew Wood of Mother Love Bone, he died and the guys came and later they formed Pearl Jam. These guys, this stuff was like late 80s cock rock, basically. If you go into early Soundgarden, that stuff had way more of like a hair metal-ish sort of feel and vibe. And even early Alice in Chains has some roots in that stuff as well. And part of it is an authentic, shift in what, seems to feel right for these bands. Like bands morph over time. You listen to Linkin Park early to late, Bring Me the Horizon, how their journey, etc. Even like early Metallica. Metallica had albums in the early to mid 90s that had like a little bit almost like grunge feel. So did Anthrax. Okay, it's true. Slayer did a nu metal album, which wasn't very good when nu metal was super popular, right? But a lot of the stuff is the influence of the record label, especially back then. It's also like pivoting. And I use the other example of Alanis Morissette, one of the biggest recording artists to ever come out of Canada. Before her grunge hit You Ought to Know and everything else that turned her an icon, she was a bubblegum pop starlet back in the 80s that was getting platformed through much music. And from what I understand, she was on a kids show. You can't say that on television. So she was like really in that network and she had major connections that were pushing her. So everybody thinks, or some people might think, oh my God, Alanis is this amazing songwriter. Oh, she's so authentic, blah, blah, blah. She is an absolute contrast. And the other example I used on the other podcast was, people will talk about like punk. And punk is supposed to be the absolute of anti-capitalist, anti-establishment, raw and authentic.
That's what I grew up on, man.
The Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols were a boy band put together by a British department store company to look a certain way to sell clothing. That's a fact.
Wild.
So that all drives home the point that in the past, gatekeepers were really relevant to a lot of this stuff. The social media has now completely changed that paradigm. The gatekeepers are no longer doing that. Now, what does that mean? It means easier access for a lot of the charlatans and the bad faith actors to yell loudly on these platforms and build huge audiences because they're telling people what they want to hear. But complaining about it does nothing. So you better put your foot in that arena and do something. Find your path, do it with integrity, learn the skills. But understand that there's also that opportunity for you. There's never been a better time if you want to play the game the way that it has to be played right now. And as I said earlier, there are aspects of the cheat codes that I'm not interested in, but like I've ridden a lot of those waves. I played this game. I've done very well. And I'm actually at a place where I'm like, I'm happy here. And I don't want to make some of the trade-offs that
Yeah.
would come with both the time I'd have to invest and also like the stress that usually comes from actually leveling up on that one particular thing. I'm working on so many other things. There's so
Yeah.
much else that I'm doing. But that particular game, right now, I'm actually like sitting a little bit steady, if that makes sense. But I'm getting new people follow me. The right people are following me. They'll message. I will respond to everything. I want to help people. I'm just not chasing virality.
Yeah.
And I think that's dangerous if you chase virality.
I agree. I have a few things, and then I want to I would love to finish on almost like a list, if you will, of people. Like, people take this away if you're a coach and you're listening, you want to do something with this. Couple quick side notes. One, if you haven't watched the Defiant ones with Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine about the music industry, it is a phenomenal mini documentary, dude. So good. I think it's on HBO. I remember getting the trial just so me and my wife could watch that, and then we were like, we don't need to pay for HBO. But it's great. Number two, funny story. I got sent home with my shirt turned inside out and a note from the principal in 7th grade for wearing my Sex Pistols shirt to school, because apparently it was inappropriate to wear at school. So part of me wishes I didn't find out about the Sex Pistols being a glorified boy band before, but I grew up listening to punk rock, man. But it's crazy. So anyway, I think with the kind of list I would love for people to leave with and what you're talking about here, because I really want people to understand how valuable this is. I think that you can make a very sustainable business, and you can do really well by focusing more on like, even like this podcast. This is a great networking tool, obviously, but it's also selfishly a really fun way for me to be less lonely as an entrepreneur in the space. I get to connect with other like-minded people, and it's sometimes I just had Mike Stella on not too long ago, and him and I have become really good friends. And he texts me. I've sent him 2 clients. One of them I didn't even know. He's like, dude, if somebody signed up because they heard the podcast and they're in pain, and now I can help them. I'm like, hell yeah, because I don't help people get out of pain. So, dude, that's amazing. I'm glad that we can help. And it's this giving nature of trying to do good things for people, just wanting to be friends with people. And then also, I think part of that is what leads to some of these. Even Jordan Shallow is a great example of this. People who have a pretty big following and a lot of influence on social media, if you really look at it, there's the virality, which is entertainment based. Then there's, most of the time, it's people who have just been putting out good information for a really long period of time, and their account kind of like jumps and then it stables, and then it jumps and then it stables. But it's because they do things like speaking engagements, they build relationships, they're helping people out, and word just gets around that this is a really good human to trust in the industry over many years. And that leads to a massive following, because if we look at their content, it's like, well, they're not doing anything different or groundbreaking, or they are doing something different, but it's nothing special. It's just them. It's unique to them, and that's why it works.
You hit on something, and I thought of this earlier, but it's worth mentioning now. And it's how people can filter authorities. Is who you rub shoulders with, who you share media with, who follows you. And that is tricky, because getting the authorities in the industry to follow you is not something you can go out and ask for. But if you develop relationships with these people, that happens. One of the reasons why I've been able to get some of the super icons of the industry that I've had on my podcast. So in the last run of things, I've had Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, Dr. Stu Phillips, I've had Dr. Lauren Colenso Semple, I've had Dr. Alyssa Olenek. I have met them all in conferences, spoke at conferences with somebody. I haven't met Lauren Colenso Semple yet. I've had Eric Helms on. I met Eric in person. And I just had Dr. Tony Bataji, who's incredible. I've had Hattie Boydell and Holly Baxter. And this list just goes on of like really crazy heavyweights. And what ended up happening is, they see who I've already had, and then they're like, oh, this is credible. And that builds up over a long time. But a lot of it too is people I've met in person. Again, it's the credibility of having shared the stage with them. And we talked about like how you get to those stages. But the people that you invest the effort into, and I know that I'll just say this quickly. There are events that are worth getting out to. And don't go out to them with like, oh, I want to stand on the stage. Get out to them to immerse yourself, meet the people. You and I met at Luca's event, 2017. 7 years later, I attended again in 2021. He doesn't do it every year. 2024, I spoke on that stage, which is the most maddening thing. I can't even like fathom how that happened. I went there knowing almost no one 7 years prior to being one of the speakers at that event. I didn't ask, didn't seek it out. Luke and I were at a gym working out in Phoenix like a year and a half prior, and he let me know. He's like, hey, I'm going to bring this back, and I want you to speak. I'm like, fuck yes, absolutely. Like, I'm not turning that down. Like the first time I tried to turn down public speaking, right? But if you get, I'll drive a point home I didn't finish earlier. If someone presents you with an opportunity, you don't feel ready, I think it's worth saying yes to, but then fucking hell, go dive in, learn how to do it really well, bust your ass. It will be worth it. Embrace that, crush it. Okay. Whether it's writing, whether it's, some sort of media, whether it's a speaking opportunity. Okay. Whether it's a podcast opportunity, lean into that stuff. Even if you're scared shitless of doing it, do it. Okay. And try not to let the people down that gave you the opportunity.
Yeah. Speaking of Luca, this is something he said that was really good that I grabbed onto, and it's people who are constantly getting more ready are more likely to see opportunities presented to them. So it's really just like constantly trying to stay ready and be that person in that version, because it's true, man. Some of my best friends in the industry, a lot of times I was sitting in this, and like Brad, we were talking about him earlier. That's how I met him. Him and I were attending a seminar, and it's like, hey, I'm Cody. I'm Brad. What's up? Like, we're just here to watch, and he had me speak at his private event in Salt Lake City. It was just at the end of last year. Another one of our good friends, Sam, I was just in North Carolina speaking at his event. And it's even the podcast, dude, like this, and this is not to impress people, but just to impress upon, we get at least 3 or 4 email inquiries a week, at least. Sometimes it's every day of the week, because the website has good SEO and people are finding the podcast. And I've been doing it for so long. It's over 1,000 episodes if you go back to before we changed the name to Choose Hard. But Mike Isertel, James Hoffman, Eric Helms, Brad Schoenfeld, like a lot of these people have been on my podcast too. And so people request. I have more guests on the show that I personally know and personally reach out to than accept as people asking to be on. Now, we've had some great podcast guests that their PR people reached out to us, and I'm like, yeah, but we turn down a lot because I don't know them well enough to trust them on the platform. And I think it goes to what you were saying before.
Yep, same thing. I get tons of emails to appear on the podcast, and I mean, quite frankly, it's like, a lot of them, I apologize, I haven't heard of. Maybe they're great, whatever. We have no relationship. And it's a PR firm. And I know it's like someone seeking, well, you want to benefit from being on my platform that I've worked to build for years.
Yeah.
And I'm not transactional in how I think about things, but sometimes when I see people who are transactional, I have to think, well, what's the risk to reward ratio? There's the time investment. I mean, I'm honored that you brought me on. Thank you, because you had to prep for this. With the time of recording, there's the production cost and time, and it's taking up one of the aired slots on your podcast. So for anybody who's listening to this from my media, guys, go check out some of the other episodes, right? Still listen to my podcast. Come on, please. But go check out some of Cody's other episodes, other great guests. Please go follow him on social media, right? Like you did a big kindness here. But yeah, you're right. Every once in a while, like a name that's like, oh, I know who that is. That's like really cool. I can say yes to this. And I'm torn because on one hand, like I've almost never asked for anything in the industry, or if I've asked, I've done it in such a way that it was still so, I put myself in a position to really benefit the other person and then really go out of my way to over deliver. But here's some harsh truth. And this is a quote from my editor at Men's Health, Ed Samuel. Nobody cares about your story. You will. A lot of coaches think, well, like I can ask to be on this podcast. I've got a really great story. No one gives a shit. I'm sorry. That is going to hurt. They don't give a shit about your story. The people whose stories we care about, it's because we're already interested in those people because of all the other stuff they've done.
Yeah.
Build the authority. Show up. Make people feel amazing. Develop relationships. And then when people realize, wait a second, this person has the credibility of, evidence-based content creation, industry leadership, business success, and a combination of all the above, then people are going to ask you and they're going to invite you. I think if you work on all those things and you very tactfully make asks for things that you want, that's okay too. But I think what we have is we have an epidemic of people asking for things that they're not ready for, they can't deliver any value on. And again, I air 2 podcasts a week. I pay a producer. I have sponsors I have to keep happy. And if I've got someone who wants to come on the podcast, is not interested in collaborating to help promote the episode and thinks, well, my job is just to show up and share my story and then I've done you a good deed and nobody's ever heard of you, guess what? There's no value in that. And that's an unfortunate reality. So you guys have to patiently and relentlessly build and lean into opportunities, show up at the events, meet people, support the things that you and I did. And yes, there's survivorship bias in these stories. We know that. But if you guys are really interested in stuff, at the end of the day, here's another side to this. A lot of this stuff can help, especially with online businesses, evidence-based information that and good social media that people will then turn around and want to hire you. But there's nothing better than just being of service to that client in front of you. And I still think that by and large, speaking on like fitness industry conference stages and being on fitness industry podcasts has minimal impact on business long term. It doesn't put clients in my business. I do this because I want to spend an hour and a half talking with you. I really do hope everybody listening actually gets some insight into this, some of the harsh truths, some of the pull back the curtains. And I honestly hope there's a lot of stuff in here that doesn't gatekeep what this is. It's a more honest and an unvarnished exploration of how it came to be. And I look back and I swear it's like if I had to like start all over again knowing how to do it, but like do it all, I'd be overwhelmed at the thought of how to do all this. I, in many places, kind of fell backwards into opportunities that I wasn't seeking, but maybe that was the key because people knew that I was just showing up consistent, doing a lot of work. A lot of the stuff is unseen the hours. But for whatever reason, right, I put myself in the right room at the right time with the right people. And people wanted to bring me on their shows, bring me on their stages. So I'm grateful.
That's it, man. That's it. I couldn't agree more, man. And I think like one of the reasons I really appreciate you coming on today and like your podcast and everything is I think we do share a similar mission. And I want to have people on here to make the industry better. Like that's really what I'm after. It's not I don't make money directly from the podcast, really, if you think about it, especially with how much it costs. And so, of course, does it build business? Kind of, but indirectly, you're never going to really know if it does or how it does. It's just about, I know there's people listening that are going to be better because of it, and it's going to make the industry a better place. It's the good side of content.
There's another way to look at this too. A lot of my clients listen to the podcast. Okay? They love it. It's more value added. It's deeper relationship, right?
100%.
It's more connection with you. You share with them other great authorities. Recently, I had a woman who was reaching out, a lot of emailing, doing a lot of research, and she's dealing with cancer treatment. She needs to get into strength training. And so she sent me a bunch of stuff that she'd been learning, researching. So I was able to send her a few resources, but I sent her a couple of my podcasts, including an episode I had with my friend, Dr. Joe Zondella, PhD in cancer biology. We talked a lot about the strength training and how important it is when you're dealing with cancer treatment. And she thought this was great. So there's a few other episodes that I was able to send her on, stuff relevant to women and hormonal health and et cetera. And, it might have been the thing that tipped over the edge to have her say, you're the person I want to work with, because it's not just that I was evidence-based, but also I had relationships and I had depth and connections in the deepest parts of the credibles industry on these things. And that probably made it a lot easier to say, this is a safe place and person to trust with a life or death decision.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of our work, when you scale out over a long enough time horizon, there are life and death aspects to it. But some people we work with, it's a lot more real and imminent and now than others. And I do think it's just one more give back. And largely, we do things like podcasting, we do things like writing, we do things like these trips to travel, these events. They do not, at our level, come close to paying for themselves relative to the time we put into them scaled over. I have sponsors now. I've had sponsors for almost a year. The previous 7 years and all the time and effort went into the podcast. My God, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's fulfilling. It wasn't paid anything for it. It was time I could have coached people. And it would take incredible longevity and scaling of the sponsor money to actually turn around over the entirety of the podcast and pay remotely close to the value of the time relative to what I make for coaching people. It's not about that at all. Okay. And for the person who may get a stage invite or any of this sort of stuff, and then you start grumbling about being compensated for your time, fuck off with that logic. It's an opportunity. Embrace it. Many of you would have or should have just gotten on a plane, paid for your own ticket for everything, register for the conference, the hotel, just to be in that room. And I've gotten so much out of those, right? When someone comes to me and asks, I'm trying to remember recently, I'm appearing at one of my sponsors at the Arnold Classic, so I'll be down there. And I was talking to him on the video call, and he's asking, how I want to be compensated. And I'm already getting exhibitor's pass, so I'm bypassing the pass for the expo. And I said to him, listen, no, like I was going to go. I'll take care of my own flight and hotel. And he turns around and he's like, all right, cool. Well, let's do some more, advertising through the podcast. So because I was abundant mindset and generous, he turned around and volunteered something over and above again. And that's how I try to look at things. If I get invited to speak and stuff, sometimes people ask, well, what's your speaking rate? Well, it's like, listen, I'm happy if you guys take care of my hotel and my flight. And, I'm just abundant minded, but then I'll turn around and try to connect them with some other speakers that I think will help them. And what ends up happening, I keep getting invited back year over year over year. Right.
Yeah.
That's better. Long view.
Dude, it goes back to the go-giver mentality. It really is. Which is such a powerful book.
I know Luca gave you that book when you first started coaching with him, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. That the leader who had no title. God, there's countless books like that I think are just phenomenal. And I have my coaches read when they're in their internship and they're going through stuff. But I think we'll wrap it up there, man. I know I want to respect your time, and I could probably keep talking to you for another hour plus, and we'll have to do it again because there's just so much value to be heard from. I think that there's only so many coaches that have really stood the test of time through the wave of social media and online coaching and are still doing well and growing. And you're one of them. And I think there's so much wisdom to pull out of it, man. So thank you for everything you do. Thank you for who you are. And of course, for jumping on the podcast and chatting with me. But tell everybody where they can find you if they don't know already, website, all that kind of stuff, so I can put it in the show notes.
My pleasure. Thank you, Cody. It's been great. It's been a little too long since we've had some face-to-face time. So, and for everybody, give me a little time. Cody will be back on my podcast as well. That's overdue. But Andrew Coates Fitness on Instagram. That's the hub. You can message me there. I will absolutely respond to your questions, thoughts, etc. Okay. If you listen to anything about this, your insights, whatever, please ask, right? Open-ended invitation. I should write more. I haven't written much lately, but I've got some good stuff on www.andrewcoatesfitness.com. Okay. My podcast is the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. Yes, I shared a bunch of the people I've had on recently. Cody goes back a fair bit. It's more of an episode of career development. But if you really want to dig, search for it, guess what? Dive in. Okay. Go there next and then play around. And as I said, for anybody who's listening who found this show through my media, guys, just go check out the other episodes. Cody, I appreciate you taking the time having me on. Thank you.
Absolutely, brother.